With the S1R Mark II's ship date quickly approaching, I feel like this was a good time to go through some of the video settings that I'm using with the S1R Mark II to kind of get the best out of this camera. Now, that being said, there are a lot of settings and there's really something for everyone. So if you're a new LUMIX user or a seasoned LUMIX user, there is settings really in here for everyone. And so with that, let's dive right in, starting first with shutter angle. When you get your S1R Mark II, it is going to default to shutter speed. And so if you want to utilize shutter angle, you will need to go in and actually change that to shutter angle. The next thing is IBIS. Now in the IBIS settings, you can just turn on IBIS and it works wonderfully with autofocus lenses. It will detect what focal length you're using and all of that. Now, if you're using LUMIX lenses, I would also look at the cropless E-stabilization. It is phenomenal, and honestly one of the reasons why I may pick up some LUMIX lenses for those scenarios where I need a little bit extra just steady handheld footage. Now, something that is specific to the LUMIX S1R Mark II is the option for shutter behavior at power off. This allows for you to determine if your shutter is actually going to close when you power off the camera. So if you're like me and you lose body caps all the time, you do have the ability now to actually close the shutter when you power off the camera. Now, those are some general settings I would utilize. Let's talk about some settings that will control the overall look of your image. Now, generally speaking, I would encourage to film everything in vlog. Now, you do have the ability to utilize real-time LUT for quick turnaround, but if I'm trying to get the best image out of the LUMIX S1R Mark II in the most dynamic range, I'm filming in vlog. Now, something to keep in mind with the S1R Mark II is that vlog is now a base ISO. It is still a dual native ISO sensor, but the base ISO levels are 200 and 1000. There is the ability to turn on a dynamic range enhanced mode, which will give you a base ISO of 400 and 2000. Now, something to mention with ISO levels and filming in vlog is I will assign the up arrow on my wheel to actually control my ISO level. Now, if you are filming in vlog, one thing you're gonna wanna do is load up your camera with your favorite monitoring LUTs. This is super easy with LUMIX Lab. You can actually download from the creator page and transmit it straight to the camera. But if you do want to do a custom LUT, you can actually develop that custom LUT and export it to an SD card. The only thing you want to remember is that this needs to be a VLT file and it needs to not exceed 8 characters in length, and it needs to be on the base file structure of your SD card or CF Express card. If you do that, you should be able to load up your custom LUTs onto your camera so that you can utilize it for monitoring, or potentially real-time LUT if you want to bake in the look. Now, once you have loaded the LUT into the LUT library, you still need to go into Log View Assist in your settings and turn that on for either the monitor on the camera or the external monitor or both. That is ultimately what will allow you to see that monitoring LUT. Now, while we're talking about the look of your image, I do want to also kind of talk about some exposure settings. One is I use a luminance spot meter, and honestly, that is the one thing that I use almost exclusively when I'm exposing for skin tones. Now, if I'm exposing for the overall image, then something that's new with the S1R Mark II is false color. You can go into your false color, you can see with the different values and things like that. And I actually have false color assigned to my left button on my rear wheel. Now, just as a quick reminder, if you don't know how to set your custom buttons, there is an option to do it in the settings, but you can also long press those buttons, any of the buttons, the rear wheel, the function buttons, and that will allow you to quickly assign what those buttons will do. So let's move on from some of our look settings to composition settings. One of the settings I'm going to utilize is my photo grid, and I'm going to use the option that helps with the rule of thirds. The next thing I'm turning on is my level gauge, and I'll typically assign that to one of the buttons on the back of the camera just to easily turn it on and turn it off. And then the other option is the frame markers. Now, frame markers are right now only allowing for a single frame marker, so I'm using it it for 2:1 currently. Now, as far as focusing, I don't typically mess with the focus speed or things like that. Now, just as a best practice, if you're doing an interview or a shot like this, I'll turn it on full area with human detection. Now, if you're in a busy environment, I would use a single spot focus. In that way, I can isolate what I want the camera to focus on. But that's autofocus. What about manual focus? Well, some settings I turn on for manual focus for when I'm using cinema lenses or just need to manually rack focus. I will typically turn on focus peaking, and you can choose whatever color fits your needs the most. But focus peaking is absolutely something I turn on. The next thing is going to be focus magnification. With the focus magnification, I'll switch that from picture-in-picture to the full display. That really helps, especially with focus peaking, to nail manual focus. Then the last thing that I do is I actually utilize monochrome live view, and I'll have that assigned to the right arrow, or really kind of whatever unassigned button I have available. I love monochrome live view. It's an easy way to isolate the focus peaking so that you can easily tell what's in focus. But the next thing that I'll mention is the most important setting you'll ever hear on a LUMIX video: red record frame indicator. And so those are my settings that I'm using for the LUMIX S1rii Mark II. If you do have any questions about any of these settings, let me know in the comments below, or reach out to me on Instagram and we could start a conversation there. As always, thank you for joining. Go and find your journey. Go embrace life. Peace.